to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ebro, Laura, and Rosenberg was popping. Today's guest, running for Manhattan District Attorney, Tali Farhadian Weinstein. And am I pronouncing Farhadian right?
Farhadian.
Farhadian. Yes, Tali
Thank
Farhadian
you.
Weinstein. Worked with Eric Holder in the Obama administration, right?
Yes.
You have some amazing accolades, but here locally, talk about your work and your involvement here in New York City.
Yes, thank you. Right. So my career took kind of an unusual turn because I started out in DC and, working at some, higher levels of government. I was a Supreme Court law clerk, and then I worked for Eric Holder, as you said. I was one of his counsel at the beginning of the Obama administration. But then I came back to New York and became a federal prosecutor, first working for Loretta Lynch over in Brooklyn, where I did all sorts of cases, from murder cases to tax evasion cases. And then my last stop, and really for me the most meaningful, was being the general counsel for the Brooklyn district attorney. And I went to work for him, for Eric Gonzalez, when he was elected, because he had this ambition to make it the model local prosecutor's office in the country, the model of progressive prosecution. And I thought it would be pretty great to be a part of that.
Well, we've had him on our show several times, and it seems like many of his ideas have had some positive impact. What of those ideas that you were close to do you want to bring to the Manhattan DA's office?
Sure, and I'm glad to hear that he's a friend of the show, because we really laid the groundwork over there for so many of the ideas that people are borrowing from all around the country. And I hear so many of my colleagues who are running for Manhattan District Attorney talking about them with admiration. So one of the things that I was really close to that I would love to bring over to Manhattan is the work we did on post-conviction justice. And let me just take a step back and say, when people think about criminal justice reform, a lot of the focus is on who is entering the criminal justice system and shrinking it at the front end. And that's really important. We did a lot of that in Brooklyn too, and we can come back to that. But I had found that people were paying less attention to what happens after a conviction is final. And if you're really going to do something about the mistakes of the past and about mass incarceration, you have to talk about the folks who are incarcerated and shouldn't be, either because they're wrongfully convicted. I mean, that's the most obvious reason, but also if they were rightfully convicted in the sense that the facts met the charge, but something about it still isn't right. They're in prison for too long. The sentence is excessive. They should be getting parole or clemency, or they might need help after they're out with reentry, or with sealing a past conviction or expunging a past conviction. So all of that is the post-conviction work. And this was one of my big priorities in Brooklyn, was to make sure prosecutors understood we have an obligation to people all the way through this until they return safely home. And then this is part of what it means to be a prosecutor, is to lean into all of that.
Well, and that post-conviction work points to where you get into people not being able to find jobs, people not being able to find good housing, people not being able to re-enter society. Am I understanding it correct?
Absolutely, because that's part of public safety, right? If people come home and they don't have the basic groundwork for stability, then the chances of them reoffending are higher. And that's not good for them, and it's not good for their communities. It's not good for any of us, right?
Yeah, I was looking at an article where you talked about this. You say critical conversations about reform too often forget about public safety. You just tweeted this about 21 hours ago. The two are not mutually exclusive, and my policies as district attorney will reflect that. Can you expound on that a little bit? Because we hear a lot about public safety these days, reimagining public safety. The term defund the police obviously is a polarizing term because people think it means that you literally want to get rid of police, and some people do mean that. But then there's other people who say, well, the defund part is reallocation, taking money from just standard policing and reimagining the support systems for the community that don't necessarily need to involve the using air quotes, strong arm of the law, if you will. Can you talk more in depth about that?
Yeah, and the word polarizing is such a good word to use. Thank you for putting that on the table, because that's really what I'm reacting to. And I'm saying this is a false choice that people are being sold. When something is not working in law enforcement, whether it's police or prosecutors, I often see that people just throw their hands up and they say, you know what, let's just get out of this business. Let's shrink the police. Let's shrink the DA's office. And because that's the only path to fairness. And I don't believe that. And that was not the approach that we took in Brooklyn. I think that, I mean, if I could just step back, sometimes it's important to say something super obvious. Safety is the precondition of a good life. It is the precondition of opportunity. You cannot have opportunity, you cannot prosper, you cannot thrive, you cannot reach your potential if you don't feel safe. Everywhere, right? Like, that's safe in your home where there's a lot of violence that people don't see, and it's in the street, and it's in the subway, and it's when you meet the police, and it's when you have to go to the police, right? You have to feel safe being able to do that. And what I was saying in that tweet, and really what I've been trying to say my whole life, not just in a couple of characters, but throughout my career, is we have to deliver that for people inside of a fair criminal justice system. And when something is not fair or it's not working, the answer is not to give up on our mission of public safety. It's to reimagine, to fix, to repair, to reform, to reckon. And I like all of those words a lot more than defund, because they, to me, propose solutions and the hard work of moving forward rather than the sort of giving up that I'm talking about.
Do you believe that too much power is given to police officers and the police?
I like the way you said it before, that there are some things that I don't think we need the police to do that currently has fallen on them, right? And I don't think the police are living the dream either if they're getting your kitten out of a tree, or if they're responding to a situation, let's say a mental health crisis, that they haven't been trained to respond to. Right. And all of us, I think, should want the police
out of trees.
I mean, so that's like that. I think that's not a very New York example.
And if anything, but that's a fireman now.
Maybe there are fewer kittens and fewer trees in Manhattan. I'm going to give you that. But I think you hear me. Not a situation for force or law, which is really what we think the police are for. Does this situation call for force and law? But look, I want to say something. The police are bearing a lot of these burdens, and the answer here too is not just to cut them out and leave us without any public servants who are responding to these crises. So I think that we are on our way as a country to understanding we have to train the police differently, and we also sometimes have to send a different core of first responders out to some situations.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that prosecutors or people, politicians, or who actually can hold police accountable? Because I think that's what the public honestly is looking for. The public is looking for an honest third party that's not influenced and isn't trying to sell us this police doing hopscotch and playing basketball skit for us to then just see videos of people being murdered who are unarmed, and then nobody being held accountable. So that's really what the public is looking for. We're looking for an answer. So activists came up with, we'll take the money away. That's all they respond to. Defund the police. Let's put it into something else. It's more preventative. But it feels like we're sliding back into this whole, well, you know, the police, they're stressed out too. Nobody cares. They have a badge and a gun. They have a badge and a gun. It's a stressful job. And so we're looking for a third party to say, yo, this guy screwed up. He's out of here. And he can't get another job ever again.
Yeah. So I have to give you more than one answer, because complex problems require complex solutions and lots of solutions.
Let me tell you, you're running for this job.
Exactly. So let me just put a bunch of things on the table, and then we could talk about them. You know, when I think of accountability, here are some avenues for police accountability. One is obviously everybody's equal under the law. It doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing. And if you violate the law, you have to be held accountable. So one of the things that I did with DA Gonzalez was to help him build, and then I supervised, a standalone law enforcement Accountability Bureau. So a separate part of the office for investigating and prosecuting cops. And by the way, it wasn't just for violent crimes by police officers, but we thought it was really important also to bring prosecutions for things like false statements, lying under oath, saying you saw something you didn't see, tampering with evidence, because that's bad no matter who does it, but it's particularly degrading to public trust if a police officer can play by a different set of rules than everybody else, right? So that's one piece of accountability. And now in New York, the district attorney's offices can still bring a lot of those cases, but deaths, when police officers kill somebody, those mostly now go to the state attorney general. And our job in the DA's offices is to support her in bringing those prosecutions. Then there's more to it. One of our responsibilities as prosecutors is to make sure that any witness that we rely on, again, right, whether a civilian or a police officer, is credible, right? I can't put somebody on the stand if I think that he's a liar, she's a liar. And with the police, because they are repeat coming back, you see the same officers all the time, you have to keep track of what you know about police officers and make your own judgments about credibility. So my team in Brooklyn, we were the first in the state to make our own list of police officers who we said, we can't rely on them. We don't trust them. We don't think they're credible. And so they can't be in our cases. And that has the effect, when you do that, of basically moving them to desk jobs, because if they can't ever swear to anything that's happened in the street, they can't really be in the street. So that's another kind of accountability. But I want to take a little bit of a bigger picture here also, because the stuff that I've said is reactive and it's important. But, if we're talking about police reform, I think it's important to know that, look, there are 18,000 police departments in this country, and each has to be met on its own terms, and the need for reform in each one might be different. And one of the great things about the new Department of Justice, which is being run by my old mentor, right, Judge Garland, is that they have resurrected a very important tool that the federal Department of Justice has to bring what are called pattern and practice investigations into police departments, where they sue the police department. And this was a law that came into being after Rodney King and the focus that came onto the LAPD. So they sue a police department, they go in, and they come to what's called a consent decree. It's just a way of saying an agreement about what has to change, and then a court monitors that agreement. I bring this up because I think the Floyd verdict, it was so important for accountability and for justice, but it wasn't the end. The next thing that happened is that the Department of Justice opened one of these investigations into the Minneapolis Police Department so that there could be this kind of systemic reform, not just holding one person accountable, but going in deeper and saying, well, what is going on here? How did this happen?
Tali, I wanted to ask you something about you as a candidate. You obviously have an awesome record with everything that you've done, Yale, Rhodes Scholar, you've sort of done it all. Your career since then has been tremendous, and your politics appear to all really be about fairness and the little guy. One thing that I know has been complicated is people's relationship with the fact that you also married into money and have I don't know if that's the only way you made your money, but I know that you and your husband have a really expensive apartment. And there's been a lot of conversation about, can someone who has so much money be able to relate to the common New Yorker? How do you sort of mix the fact that all of your policies are about the little man, but you also happen to have a lot of money yourself personally?
So look, I want to say two things about that. Also, thank you for all the compliments before the hard-hitting question. I sense a pattern.
All those things can be true.
Look, there she is checking out patterns. You know what I mean? We're going to be on her list.
There you go. No, that's not how it works. So look, I'm going to give you two answers. One is, my husband is a wonderful person, and I'm very proud that he's so successful in his career, but I am still surprised that I hear so much about him in this campaign, because he's not running for district attorney. And I was 35 years old when I got married to him. I have been a public servant my entire career, except for 1 year when I worked in a law firm. And that didn't change when I got married. I still got up at the same time every day and still did the same kind of job. As you said, really fighting for fairness for every person. So, that's me. That's my identity, is my career as a lawyer. But I want to answer the second part of your question also, because I actually think it's really important to say, like, if you're living with different experiences, what does that really mean in terms of how you see the world? And I've had lots of experiences in this country of having more and having less from the moment of my arrival. When I came here as an immigrant from Iran with my family, 1979, we had our whole life in a couple of suitcases. We first lived in one room together on the LIE in Queens. And my parents then worked really hard to make our life better and better incrementally. And I draw from all of those things and also the experiences I have now to say, I know what it means to have opportunity. I know what it means to have less and to have more. I know what hardship is, and I want opportunity for everybody else. It's only actually strengthened my conviction that we have to fight for each other. And I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm not better than the millions of other people who have stood at our borders and have been turned away. I was lucky, right, that I was admitted into this country when so many other people weren't. And I really just believe in paying it forward. And, the comforts that I have now just strengthen that and deepen that. And what I said at the beginning, I'm going to say again, I think safety is the precondition of opportunity. If you don't feel safe, nothing else follows.
And Tali, sorry,
go ahead,
Rose.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tali, also for your personal life, because as Ebro pointed out earlier, I mean, your name obviously stands out. When I saw Farhadian, I saw the IAN and assumed you had Armenian in your background, but you came from Iran. So, and now your husband is Jewish. Your last name's Weinstein. So take us through the background that is Tali Farhadian Weinstein.
Sure. Yeah. So the name tells you a lot of things about me. So Farhadian is, my grandfather made up that name because because we didn't have last names in Iran, and then suddenly you had to have one. And IAN, it's like SON in English. So it means like the children of. I actually grew up with some Armenian neighbors, and that people have been telling me that my whole life, that they use that formulation too. So that's the name that my father's father, who was a cloth peddler in Esfahan, gave to our family. And I'm Jewish as well, not just my husband.
Oh.
So the Jews of Iran are, we like to think, one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. We believe, although I cannot prove it to you, that we are the descendants of Queen Esther. And it's a big part of why we had to leave, because when the violence of the revolution came, anti-Semitism also bubbled up. And there were all sorts of rumors about what was going to happen to Jewish people. People started to disappear. In fact, just a few months after we left Iran, many of the elders of the Jewish community were hung in the town square in Tehran, where my family was living. So that's a big part of our story of why we wound up here. And then Tali is, it's a Hebrew name. My given name is Farima Farhadian. So when I tell you I've had lots of different experiences, it's true. I landed in this country with a name that nobody could pronounce. And it's interesting. I've been going back to my immigration file, and I found a letter addressed to me by someone at the INS. Remember when they used to call it that? And it's written by hand. So it's not like a computer spit this out. It says, "Dear Farima Farhadian," I'm 4 years old at the time, "you were found to have willfully used a fake document to deceive the government of the United States. Please report to 26 Federal Plaza in a couple of days to explain yourself." And I look at that now and I think, oh my God, like the inhumanity, like they wrote this letter to a kid. Right. And then, of course, 26 Federal Plaza is where the FBI is. I mean, I've been to that building now as a federal prosecutor, like countless times. Right. So it's quite a journey.
Wow.
On that, I was going to ask you, because immigration, obviously, and ICE, and, deportation and DACA, and I mean, it's just a laundry list of things being dealt with right now under this new administration. With Biden, you know, you hear talk of the border and the crisis, and what exactly is the role of the Manhattan DA in dealing with immigration here in New York City?
Yeah. So, you know, DA's offices, we enforce state law, not federal immigration law. And I think I really want everyone listening to absorb this. This is so important to me to understand. If you come to us, we're not going to ask you about your immigration status. We're not going to send you over to be deported. Our job is to keep you safe, no matter who you are, no matter what your immigration status is. And I think we actually have a lot of special responsibilities to immigrants. You know, DA Gonzalez, I don't think he knows this, but the first thing I ever read about him before I met him, before he called me up and asked me to come work for him, was I read this article about how he had started to think about how he charged people who were not citizens differently, because he didn't want some charges trigger federal deportation and others don't. And he didn't want to send people into an unjust result, like suddenly a family is separated over a misdemeanor. And as far as I know, he's still the only district attorney that I'm aware of in the state that takes that approach. And that is certainly something that I would bring to Manhattan, because to me, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look out for the most vulnerable among us. It's also why when I was working for him, we joined forces with the Attorney General and we sued ICE, because they were using our courthouses as bait, right? To pick people up who were not citizens because they were coming in to testify or to be a witness, or they were the defendant. And what we saw is particularly women who were the victims of domestic violence who were not citizens just stopped coming forward, because now they had to make a really impossible choice. I'm suffering this violence at home. I'm scared, but if I come in, like, what's going to happen to me? Is the father of my kids going to get deported? So we went to court and we said what ICE was doing was interfering with our ability to deliver on public safety. And I'm happy to say we won. And I could go on. Yeah. And there, you know, there are crimes that happen disproportionately to non-citizens, like hate crimes or certain kinds of frauds. And we have to be vigilant about that.
On hate crimes, because, you know, whether it is what's going on in Israel, between Israel and Palestine, and you see the increase of violence against Jews, and you're hearing stories of increase of violence against even some Muslims. We also just had an increase in violence in America against, you know, our Asian brothers and sisters, you know, due to the whole negative energy around COVID-19 from the last administration.
Yeah.
How is your department gonna plan to address hate crimes in New York City? And is that even fall on a state thing, or does that automatically get pushed to a federal case?
Oh, it's totally a state thing. Federal hate crimes are rare. This is really our responsibility. And we're having a rally this afternoon at noon about anti-Semitism. You all should come. I'm so glad you asked that question about all of these different kinds of hates together, because all of them are equally intolerable. Attacking somebody because of who she is, whether it's her religion or it's her ethnicity or it's her race or it's her gender, and because you have some opinion about what's going on in the Middle East or you don't, all of it is equally unacceptable. And just, especially in New York, right? Like we are the city of immigrants. And our job, I believe, is to name hate crimes, to investigate them differently, to prosecute them aggressively, because when you commit a hate crime, you're not just hurting one person, you're hurting an entire community, and there has to be accountability for that. And then we also have to do the hard work of getting to the underlying reasons of why it's happening. And at the same time that we're doing the work of accountability and protection, we're also working on prevention, so that, you know, we're stop the cycles of hate, whether they come from, prejudice that people need to be taught differently about each other, or mental illness. I mean, there are a lot of different threads here.
Go ahead, Rosenberg, because we got to wrap soon. So make sure you hit her with the Trumpian. We got to get to the Trumpian.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is not that. I'll be quick, though. Tali, is it hard for you, though, in general, dealing, you know, obviously, even if it's not an issue that directly affects the way you govern and do your job, everyone's talking about Israel and Palestine. You're Iranian, you're Jewish. I'm sure this must be an issue that sort of tears you up to see.
It does tear me up to see so much suffering. We want peace for everybody in every part of the world. I think all good people agree on that. It is emotional and painful for me to see what is going on right now in the Middle East. And then it hurts me as a New Yorker to see that people are being attacked because of their identity here.
You might inherit a major case if you get this job. I don't know where it'll be by the time you take office, but currently Cy Vance has announced, he made it public that they are exploring the criminal charges against the Trump administration. I'm sure you are going to hit me with, though I can't speak on cases that are currently happening, blah, 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 but I had to ask. What can you share with us about that criminal case, about the civil case, and about what's going on currently in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office?
So, as you predicted, I have to disappoint you and say, and you wouldn't want me to do anything else, right?
Because I don't want you to botch the case because I want to see the dude go to jail. Yo, listen, we want to see that Trump perp walk real bad out in these streets, Tali. We want to see your man's in cuffs. We probably never get it, but we want to see it.
So I'm sure you also want a district attorney who follows the rules and is ethical and looks at every
You're right.
case
Okay,
with an
you're
open
right.
mind.
You're right.
But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say something. Okay, let's think of it as a type of case that could be in the DA's office, whether he's the defendant or it's another complex tax evasion, fraud case, whatever we're reading about in the paper. And I'll leave you with this. I think that voters the fact that this case is being written about should help voters to appreciate that this DA's office is different from many others because this is the financial capital of the world in many ways, and there are lots of industries that are here, and you need a prosecutor who is going to enforce the rules of fair play against everyone and in every line of work. Right. And so that means two things. I think it means, first of all, you want to have a DA who knows what she's doing. There's broad tax evasion cases and complex cases and has been to the grand jury many times and all of that. But also, and this is harder to put in a bottle, but I think you also want a DA it's not her first rodeo in terms of dealing with the hardest cases. When I worked at the Supreme Court, there are 80 cases a year, roughly, in the court. That's 80 out of 10,000 petitions that the court gets a year. They're just the 80 hardest cases. Or when I was working for Eric Holder, every week I would go over the litigation positions that the Solicitor General was taking, the hardest questions that were in the Department of Justice, against some really, aggressive and fancy litigants on either side, and with a national spotlight often. So I think that the judgment that develops from having those experiences is really important to bring to this type of case.
Great answer.
Thank you.
And we thank you for your time too. And
it was such a pleasure. Thank you.
It was great to meet you. Good luck on the race. And it was just an honor to speak to you today. So keep pushing.
I hope I'll get to come back. It was really lovely to talk to all of you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tali.
All right.
Bye.